Oh, that good old intro song that sometimes.
We can get through this time.
Well, I feel like when you make it past that one little mark, then it's going to make it.
I like this music. All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to In Poor Taste, an irreverent guide to drinking wine. I'm one of your hosts, Caitlin, and we've got Britt here, hopefully with a better internet connection than I have.
It looks like it, from my end at least.
Okay, Britt, tell us what's up. What are we doing here? What's our mission statement?
Like Caitlin said, we're an irreverent guide to drinking wine. We want to demystify wine. We want to make wine accessible to people. We are two friends who are drinking alone together, learning about wine and teaching others along the way. We are so excited that you guys are here. So Caitlin, what are we doing today?
Oh my gosh, I am so excited. I hope I'm not frozen in like a really weird, funky face. I have no idea what is happening with my internet. I'm sorry. It is raining here where I live in San Diego, so I'm going to blame that. Basically, we have a special guest today. I know. It's the weather's fault. It's my landlord's fault. I have all kinds of pointing fingers going right now. So we have a special guest today, which I think Britt and I are both just over the moon about having our special guest to talk to us today, Mimi Casteel, who's going to come in a second. Woohoo! So excited.
Woo-hoo!
Britt, do you want to give us
I would love to introduce Mimi. So we are kind of finishing up Women's History Month, and we wanted to really highlight women in the industry. And we don't want it to be a 1 month thing. We want it to be a year-round thing. We want to see 50% in the industry. So that's what we're looking for. I don't know what I can hear something.
Oh my, there's a lot of background noise.
It's okay. There we go. And so we're excited to have Mimi on. Mimi Casteel, I got to listen to her speak about a year ago on regenerative farming, and she's just really inspiring, really powerful speaker, and just like really passionate. And it makes me want to make better choices in my own like wine adventure. So without further ado, I do want to talk a little bit about Mimi's background, but I feel like she would probably do a better job at it. So like, let's have her come on. All right, Mimi. There we go.
Hello. Thank you for coming on the show today.
Oh, thanks for having me. Irreverent is my middle name. So this is the place for me.
Perfect.
I wish we could be doing this all in person, but this is the next best thing, especially since I get to see a picture of your rooster in the background. So.
Yeah. We all need a little dead rooster in our lives. That's how I keep him alive in my heart.
Yeah, great. Some people do like taxidermy. Some people do like, maybe wear a rabbit's foot or something, but I like that painting.
Yeah, actually, I'm like, there's my dog, right? A watercolor of her. She's still alive, but she's on the way out, I'll be honest. So, gotta get that picture so that I can just continue to love her later.
She's in the next room, like, what?
Wait? What are you saying about me?
Not yet, bitches.
Guess who's gonna go take a dump on your pillow?
She's probably like, bitch, speak for yourself. I am not on my way out.
I'll show you on my way out.
Britt's dog has definitely peed on my pillow in the past. She doesn't like me.
Yeah, it's like a dominance thing. I don't know where she gets it from, but I hear that dogs are like their owners or something like that. Anyway, that's great. Well, how we always like to start off the episodes is everyone pops open a bottle. So if you're watching and you have something that you're drinking along, definitely open that up. Put it in the comments what you're drinking, what you're tasting. Caitlin, you want to kick us off with what you're? Ooh, there we go. We can see what Mimi is drinking. I've got my Hopewell wine here. Okay, Caitlin, what are you drinking? Tell me all about it.
Okay, so I am drinking. Oh, Lauren can pull up a photo. She has one for this one. Okay, so I am drinking the Farmlands 2019 Pinot Noir from Johann Vineyards, and that was like one of the producers on the list that Mimi provided us, which we posted on our Instagram. So I picked this wine because it is like an incredible price point, which I think is something that might come up later, or at least for me when I was noticing a lot of the regenerative farming wines can get a little pricey. And this one I think was like $22. And I was like, that is a killer deal. So it's a Pinot Noir from the Willamette Valley. And also I was really excited because this morning I got to participate in a regenerative farm. Well, not participate. I was listening to a regenerative farming conversation by it seems like one of the winemakers here, who's also like a regenerative farming consultant. I think his name was Dan Rinke. You guys, y'all, I'm sure know him better. And I think he'd been down in San Diego once before because he looked very familiar to me, maybe for like a festival, a wine thing. But it was so great. I felt like I was excited to get to like hear him speak about it, and then also get to drink a wine that he may have had some part in, which is pretty cool. This is also a theme you'll hear more about, but this winery is committed to meticulous vineyard management practices, highlighted by biodynamic farming methods and a permaculture design. And basically they're focused on the entire farm as a living organism, which is awesome. And they farm to mimic the natural microbiological ecology of the soil where the wines evolved. So I just felt like you couldn't get more regenerative farming than that. And just because if you've been tuning in the last few weeks, you know that every week I have totally mucked up a female maker somewhere or another with a lot of help from the wine shops I went to. But this week, I accidentally got one by a female winemaker. So I learned that there's a winemaker here. Her name's Morgan, and I don't remember her last name. You probably know her, Mimi. But I was so excited when I found out. What's her last name? Morgan what?
Oh, I knew you were going to ask me that, and now I'm not going to be able to remember it. I feel like it's and she, like, I like her. We're friends, but I don't usually use people's last names, and so I knew you were going to call me out on that. But Morgan is great, and she's really doing great things at Johann, and I love Dan, so I'm so glad you chose that wine.
I too, and I watched a little video with Morgan today, just kind of talking about her background. It was so cool, and I was like, how did I accidentally manage to get a female winemaker the one week I wasn't asking for it? So, small little victory. So,
nice work.
What about you, Mimi? What are you drinking today?
Morgan Beck, just so everybody knows.
Thank you. You know, I almost said Beck, and I was like, that's going to be wrong. That's not going to be right. I thought it was a short name, but I didn't want to.
I don't know this. I'm reading people's comments on the side, so I'm like, thank you, Sarah King.
Yeah,
probably. Sarah King. Hi, Sarah King. So I am also drinking Oregon, which is funny because it's out. I mean, usually I wouldn't be, but here we are. I am drinking the Irie Vineyards 50th anniversary sparkling rosé of Pinot Meunier. 2015 was the 50-year anniversary of the Irie. Jason, the second generation winemaker and vigneron at the Irie, is a dear friend of mine. And I think, you know, the thing about Irie that is so heartstrings for me is that they never embraced another way of doing things. It was really for them, you know, the disturbance pattern that we have really embraced in all of agriculture didn't make sense to David. It never made sense to Jason. Jason was an ecologist like me and has just never wanted to, you know, try to change the ecosystem that we, you know, planted our flag in. And that's, you know, that's kind of at the heart of what we're trying to accomplish with these practices. So, you know, I think as far as Oregon terroir goes and a generational story for Oregon wines, they really kind of have the corner on that.
Cool. I wish I could try that. It sounds so yummy.
And look how pretty.
I know that color is incredible.
That's so awesome.
Oh, and Johan Vineyards is tuning in on IG Live. So they're yay that. Okay, what are you, Caitlin? I hope that you are unfrozen by the time this question is done. Okay, great. What are you tasting in your wine, and what do you want to listen to when you drink your wine?
Okay, so well, first of all, it's Pinot Noir, which is funny because I feel like a lot of people ended up with Pinot Noirs kind of accidentally just from, cherries. The biggest cop-out answer ever, but
I know, no. Crunchy red fruits, right? that's what you always say.
But it's really true. Oh, that's so funny. Yeah, this wine is really like, it really is just like delicious, tart, crunchy red fruit cherry. Like I feel like I want to say like some sort of like cherry flavored candy or something, but really we're still in the cherry realm.
Ludens?
Ooh, Ludens.
Ludens.
I mean, this is so good.
My favorite wine descriptors. The Ludens cherry. I'm really getting Ludens cherry here.
I know it's like terrible when you're just like fall back on really cliche answers, but it really is like a delightful Pinot Noir. It's delicious.
I feel like we could do a whole episode on ridiculous wine descriptors, or like, it's just like, yeah.
Yeah. And then I decided do you want me to do songs now?
Sure, let's do. Oh, we could do it later at the end. Let's
here, so
let's just do it here.
You want to do it now?
No, let's wait till the end. I can't hear you because you keep cutting out, so I really have no idea what you're saying. So great. Okay, Mimi, what are you tasting in your wine?
I'm really getting some cherry. No, I mean, this is super delightful. There's like gooseberry. It smells just, I mean, so in Oregon, one of the smells of harvest coming is that the briar bushes are full of ripe blackberries. They're just ripe at that stage where they're about to be too ripe, but they're just perfect. And that smell of the briar and the berry at the same time. So it's not all just cloying fruit, but the spicy briariness is all here. And then there's like some really nice, like herby, almost like a whole cluster character to it. It's really, really delightful. And the bubbles are so fine and just texture, beautiful texture. It's got it's not an overly biscuity sparkling. There's not a lot of yeastiness to it. It's still in a pretty primary phase, but it's really, really, really nice. It's the first bottle of this I've opened, so I'm glad I have a few more to sit on.
Nice. Cool. So that's a 2015. So I feel like that'll definitely
put some of that away if you can get your hands on it. I don't even know if people can buy it now, but
I know.
So good.
Buy it.
I know. If I see it, I'm gonna buy it. But I'm like so bad at sitting on wine though too, because I'm like, ooh, I just want to try it. Like
you could die. I mean, you could die tonight. So
yes. There's a practice of people who consider death all the time, and that actually makes them happier because then they live more in the moment. And I don't remember what it's called, but it's something. And I was like, oh, I was listening to a podcast about how we should really be considering our death more because then we'll be happier in our current life. I was like, so true.
I think I'm that person. I just open the bottles. I don't even feel sad about it for a second.
Good. Yes.
I'm not regretting a future choice at all because I will forget that I ever had it. So why not? Why shouldn't I enjoy it right now?
Yes. Well, Mimi, I would love it if you could talk a little bit about your background and how you kind of got into this field. And then Caitlin has some more questions about like regenerative farming. But if you could like talk to us about kind of how you came into wine and how you came into really regenerative agriculture, that'd be great.
Sure.
How you became the badass you are today.
Well, it was it's an ongoing and circuitous path. So I grew up on a vineyard and a winery, one of the early Oregon wineries, Bethel Heights. So that's my family, and kind of was immersed in the wine culture as it was in the early Oregon iteration of itself. Very different than it is now. But it was basically at that time, farms were still surrounded by a lot of wild nature. So my childhood, even though we were pretty isolated, I felt, just surrounded by life, and was really kind of at a very young age, kind of desperately bonded to nature. So I spent all those early years just in the periphery of the vineyard. I mean, I was so into the harvest. It was such a high energy time. And I loved listening to my parents talk about wine at the table and tasting the wines with them, and really sort of like smelling the smells and tasting the tastes and just being a part of that. But then for me, it was really the magic of the place was in the periphery, and the system that we were kind of tucked into. And that led me away from wine. So I went off to college and, first got a really valuable liberal arts education, a bachelor's degree, and, learned how to communicate, I guess. That's the most I can say for what I did.
Don't knock the communication degrees.
Caitlin is a communications professor.
Well, then I beg you to excuse what I call communication. But then after that, really knew that I wanted to work in wildlands. So my master's degree was in forest ecology and systems biology, and kind of took me into public lands, which is where I thought I wanted to live. I wanted to live in the backcountry. I wanted to do research. And that was really where I had the first of several awakenings about agriculture. I mean, it was an interesting place to reflect on my agricultural upbringing, and then to be going back home occasionally and visiting and seeing the way the valley was changing and how agriculture was changing. And, when I was in college, some of the first genetically modified crops were being released and being put out on massive landscapes. And it was really a time to be kind of drinking out of the fire hose of agricultural technology. And then I was working in wildlands and thinking about, these places that I wanted to protect so badly. And it became super clear to me that agriculture really is the biggest threat to the future of everything. And it's also the key to how we've managed to get where we are. And so how would you, if what you desire to see in the world is some verdant and healthy life for anybody who comes after you, to me, it was clear that I needed to work on the front lines of that. And that was back in agriculture. And since wine was what I knew, it was an obvious place to come back to. But I really immersed myself in the community of what at the time was just, people called it biological agriculture, organic, biodynamic. I mean, it kind of encompassed everything. And regenerative has only been a word for the last, couple of years. But the philosophy behind it and the people that I found in my early years coming back were really formative for me in terms of like knowing what I thought we could do with agriculture to heal the wounds that we've created.
Yeah.
Many words, lots of too many words.
No.
Have you ever read the book by Edward Abbey? It just reminded me of you when I was thinking about you living in the backcountry and being like part of that. I was like, why can't I think of Desert Solitaire, right? Or
Desert Solitaire. It's one of, I don't reread books very often, and it's one that I have actually read several times. Yeah. Yeah,
me too. I love that book. And when you were saying it, I was just like, oh, that just feels like you had his life.
I wish.
And also, like in that same vein, I know there's like a lot of discussion right now about like trees and how trees are alive and talking to each other. And there's like some jokes going around about it. But there was a book called oh gosh, now I'm
Overstory?
Yeah, the Overstory, which was loosely based, at least one of the stories was loosely based on a real woman who studies trees. And it kind of reminds me of like her same story is like, I loved nature, you know, I loved growing up around these things. And it's just when you read that, you're just like, oh my gosh, I forgot how it can connect us. Like nature connects us in a way that we're so disconnected from.
Yeah.
So I love that was like what you have become like a cultural icon of, I feel like.
I mean, a champion of, in my opinion. But maybe you can talk a little bit about, I see in the questions, the difference between like sustainable ag, regenerative ag, and really describe kind of like what it means to be regenerative. Yes, go ahead.
That's my first question is, what the heck is regenerative farming? And what does that actually look like for you? Like practically, what would we see if we saw your place? So yeah, what the heck is regenerative farming?
Well, it's going to be a lot of different things now because it's a term that's being used and codified and defined. And it's hard to it's hard to be in the midst of what is because this moment is so ripe with opportunity, right? We're really like, there are people who are talking about it on the mainstream stage. And so on the one hand, it's super exciting. On the other hand, I think that it's a definition that needs to be sort of adaptive, and that's hard for people. I think to not be able to boil it down to a few words or a couple of bullet points. But for me, it really is an agricultural system that repairs and maintains and facilitates all of the cycles that have been broken historically by agriculture. I mean, that's the very simple way of putting it. But what we have in our agriculture today are linear systems. And even what we call sustainable now is to sustain some kind of status quo that has nothing to do with being able to have any type of real longevity, but just the idea being we're not going to continue to make it worse, and that we'll kind of sustain some sort of level where we are, at least. And I don't want to throw anybody under the bus because I think there's a lot of really good intention, both in the realm of what we call sustainable agriculture and all the other, terms that we use. But to me, like the time for that kind of luxury and self-indulgence around what we think we can actually sustain is over a long time ago. So we need to be accepting the fact that, we need to be working very aggressively towards repairing systems that have been completely broken. So we have these circular, if you think about life on Earth and just in general, how is that possible? It's more or less a closed system. It's open only energetically. So the energy comes in, but the physical resources are finite. And the only way that it's been sustained over millennia is through the way biology recycles all of those materials using that energy that comes in as that's the only openness of this system. And what we've done is take these systems that were circular and actually cycled all of that energy and all of the elements and minerals and all of those things that the life actually cycled and made them linear. So instead of having circular systems where things are maintained in place and they're being regenerated constantly, that is what the only promise the earth ever made is abundance and the sustenance of life, right? It never promised to make us a profit. It never promised to facilitate the global exchange of nutrients and minerals and then a waste stream that went into geologic time and basically made itself unavailable for the next how many millions of years, really, if we're being honest. And so to me, if I'm being very, very clear and honest about what I think regenerative agriculture needs to be, it's closing those systems again. It's making them circular again. And so if you came to my farm, we're not even a fraction of an inch towards being that, but we're trying, like we're really trying to make headway towards closing those nutrient cycles, making a circular, I guess, economy of the resources that we have on site, and only taking away really it's sugar and water basically in the wine, and then trying to put more back. I mean, we're really trying to accelerate and facilitate the regeneration and the aggressive growth of the things that actually make all that cycling possible.
What are practices that you're implementing that are doing this on your farm, or like things that would promote that kind of regeneration?
Well, the one that people are most focused on right now is, this covering of the soil and having, no bare soil basically. So, I mean, we're very accustomed to, and we actually kind of have some psychological ties to the plow and the breaking of the earth and the tilling of the garden. And really in nature, there's no precedence for that outside of a massive disturbance. So something that would only come around every, couple 100,000 years, maybe. I mean, that type of event where the earth is completely upheaved would never happen outside of like a landslide, an earthquake, a volcanic eruption. I mean, those are setbacks that are like serious from an ecosystem perspective. And if you think about like the thing that nature has done is maintain this sort of circular economy by facilitating this controlled disequilibrium of energies and gas exchange, and putting it into a bank in the soil, and then the organisms in the soil are constantly creating new surface area for chemical and biological reactions. And I mean, I think that that's what's really hard for people to get their heads around, is that this problem that we're facing right now, climate change, whatever level you believe in that, that the earth is constantly trying to maintain homeostasis, but with sort of controlled disequilibrium. So that necessity is that those cycles are driven by these pumps, and the pumps are the plants, and the plants need to be pumping all the time for those cycles to continue. So when we remove them and we put bare earth there, it's a linear system that can only go towards a homeostasis that means death to the planet, basically, like where you reach that dissipation of energy and things are no longer cycling. And that's the first law of thermodynamics. Things will move in that direction if we continue to block that circular system and make it linear.
I heard someone talk this week because I was attending like a couple different talks on this, and I heard a couple amazing things that people said, but one of them had explained like moving from a traditional farming practice into a regenerative one was like moving from a what am I going to kill today perspective into a what am I going to bring to life today. And I just thought that was like such a cool way of being like, and then I think you even said at one point, I read one of your quotes that was like, agriculture school, you're taught to control as many variables as possible, but you want to as many variables as possible. Like the more you can add in, the more you create like this active ecosystem that's like healthy and regulates itself, rather than like trying to stay on top of regulating it all the time. So I thought those were really kind of cool ways of thinking about it. Okay, so one question that had come up a lot, because you were generous about giving us that gift. Well, it was a gift, but the list of people to look at who are practicing some of these regenerative farming practices. And so when we sent a lot of our viewers out to go buy the wines, a lot of people had trouble. But they also were like, well, what's the difference between organic and sustainable? And I know you touched on this a little bit, like organic, biodynamic, sustainable. I was just wondering if you can like elaborate a little bit more on like what makes regenerative different from those categories.
Well, right now it's a bit of the Wild West. There are a few certification programs in play. The regenerative organics certification is the main one on the main stage, and they're definitely, in a hurry to have a certification validation for regenerative practices. I think, there are people within the organic community and who are certified organic who are probably practicing regenerative practices. And then, on top of that, there are probably people who call themselves or who certify as sustainable, but they actually go above and beyond that and are regenerative. And this is where it does get hard. I mean, we look to labels now for accountability. And I know that this won't make me super popular, but to me, that's kind of a problem because the people who can afford to participate in those certification programs, that's already a bar that's been placed there, right? So that's already an exclusion of people who would maybe want to do the right thing anyway, but they can't pay to play, if you will. And the burden of proof of a healthy product should neither be put on the consumer nor the farmer who's doing the right thing. And so I think that for me, even what I want to answer your question, but I also just want to acknowledge the fact that people who don't want to farm benignly and who don't want to participate in using their impact on the land to make a better future for everyone's children, they should be paying and putting that on their label. I mean, that's where I think transparency should be, and that's where the burden of proof really should lie. And if anything, our government should participate in ground truthing those things, but it shouldn't be one of those things that you can only afford to do if you're a wealthy landed farmer, right? I mean, it's just another way that we maintain these social constructs that are, we know, really fucked up. So that, I think, to answer your question, the best answer that I have is really wine has a lot of problems. Okay. And in macro, wine has a lot of problems. It's difficult to find, a price point that is equitable for all, where the practices are truly good and benign and should be out there, people should be enjoying them. I don't think that we've got a really solid answer for that outside of it still kind of works to know the people who make it. And that's why, I'm very comfortable saying if my wines stop appearing in other states and other countries, probably better for everyone, probably better for the world, certainly better for my peace of mind. Just because I think people should be able to come and see what I'm doing. If you really care, you should at least be able to access the person who's growing your food and be able to drive past that and feel good about what you're seeing, or take your kids there and have an experience. That it's so long-winded, and I can really go off about these things, but it's hard. And I just can only acknowledge that it's really freaking hard because it's mostly greenwashing.
Yeah,
that's no question.
Yeah,
mostly greenwashing. And even if you look online at the various certification programs, you will very quickly become confused about how that relates to anything sustainable. So, find your favorite, make them your friend. I want to be everyone's friend.
I mean, I want to be your friend. That's why we're having you on this show. Actually, McKenna brought up a good question, and I wanted to kind of ask a couple of questions around this, specifically regarding to wine. Is it like any other crop? But also, what I'm interested in knowing is, how is it different? How can you tell a difference between a regenerative wine and one that's done commercially? And as a consumer, what are things that you notice as that you're like, oh, these wines taste totally different, and why, and what are kind of those differences?
Yeah, it's a great question. So to McKenna's question, I would say, one of the problems of this moment in particular, I don't think this is going to be true in the future, but right now, one of the problems is the way that we set up vineyards and the way that we design vineyards is not very compatible with farming regeneratively. There's a huge compaction burden. There are lots of issues with the aesthetic that we like to see, the presence of anything else growing, for example. And then, the thing about that's just undeniably true, especially where I live, is that this organism that we've decided is the king of what makes good wine, Vitis vinifera, so the European wine grape that we're all so wedded to, is horribly susceptible to diseases that can only be really controlled in many environments with fungicide programs. And so there are empirical problems with both clonally selecting for a plant that really wants to get a particular disease, and that could be powdery mildew, it could be phylloxera. I mean, we've built over time, we have very preciously made this a very weak plant, and then we put it in these trellis systems that have to be maintained in a particular way. It's the time to set things up for regenerative agriculture is not after you've built a super tight trellis system that's 3x3 or even tighter. I mean, those things don't go together, So unless it's really small and you're surrounded by, a beautiful native ecosystem, it's really hard to see a way into adapting that system to a regenerative program that actually has some longevity. So I will just acknowledge that first and foremost. But then, there is the plant itself, which has some issues. And I think that we should be exploring multi-fruit fermentation, hybrids, all of the ways that we could start making fermented, local, true terroir beverages for people that don't have to be super expensive. Because the thing that we don't want, the thing that I really don't want is to anymore have this be a classist thing. I mean, making wine and getting it into a bottle should not mean that it has to be only for the 1%. That's a thing that I really struggle with. And, rightly so. I should feel bad about that. So I don't know. This is me flogging myself. With my dead rooster to judge me in the background. I don't even know if I answered the question.
This
question.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just the question one more time is it specific to wine versus any other crop?
It's a really, thank you for steering me back towards the road. Yeah. So the biggest challenge for a regenerative vineyard in my climate is compaction. To control powdery mildew, the amount of times that we have to spray to keep the fruit clean, to maintain this thing that everybody expects, it's at odds with having soil that's protected, that has good texture, that has good tilth. And it would be so much easier if we didn't have trellises and the vines had a lot of space and they were able to grow to the size that they want to be. And if they were hybrids and didn't get powdery mildew, I mean, there's a million things. But in the current world, so if you were to visit my vineyard and see what it looks like, I mean, we have full cover on the floor and it's diverse. It's, things grow in the vineyard and we let them grow there and we encourage them to grow there, even if we think they're weeds. And that's because we know that there's no such thing as weeds, and every plant is serving a purpose. And the main purpose is really just that pump that I was talking about that maintains that circle of energy. And then the vines can, they can really, the beauty of wine, if there is a thing that wine is capable of that other things aren't, is that it can wear all of those energetic connections. It can be the voice of all of those energies. And to me, I just had this conversation this morning because anybody who ever listens to me talk is like, she clearly hates wine. Why is she still here? I mean, obviously she just doesn't think that it should exist. But I've had the wine, you've had the wine. That's why we're here today. Like, you've had the wine that opened your eyes or changed your mind or made you think, and it's just like, whoa, something is startling me here. And invariably for me, the farm behind that wine looks very different than the farms that I see all the time. So that's all I can say. I mean, there isn't a lot of good like scientific research looking at this stuff yet, but there will be. And it's going to be difficult because we can fake a lot of things. We can manufacture and reverse engineer. We are so good at using very reductive science to kind of figure out what people want and what they like and but our mouths and our faces were designed to actually know when something has energy. That's a thing. And we taste it. Like, when you taste it, you do know. And that's my best answer.
Nice. I actually love one of the things that I had heard you talk about, and it reminds me of this, is you were talking about that bare land and tilling and how you're like, if terroir is this thing that you're searching for, you're making your terroir just look like everyone else's when you're not letting this, bio like sphere, whatever, be created in the soil. And it's like, if terroir is this thing that we're searching for, then why are we settling for Cokes? That we're just creating Cokes because we're engineering this wine to be whatever, perfect, to be what the consumer wants. So I thought that was very good. And it reminded me a lot of what you were just speaking about.
Yeah. It makes me think too of like, I think you had said this on a podcast or something in this vein that was like, we can continue, I'm paraphrasing very loosely, but we can continue to create solutions for issues like upon issue, upon issue, upon issue. But if we don't just like go to the very beginning and ask ourselves, like, how did that work without us fixing every issue? Then like there's some beauty in like being able to create an ecosystem where like, I think someone else had said, she said, if your biology isn't being nurtured, then you're going to have to pay for that service elsewhere. And it made me think like, it was Nicole Masters. She was speaking the other day. And it's like, yeah, if you're not nurturing the biology and the land and like the earth that you're actually trying to grow things out of, then you're going to have to add the chemicals. You're going to have to add the pesticides. All of a sudden you're way down the line of adding things when you could just like start to detract and like let the land recuperate is what I'm taking away from this, at least in some ways. So
Nicole is amazing. And the thing that is true, and the battles and the camps are so divided over this, but there's really no argument that makes any sense. I mean, if you think about, organic farming or regenerative farming can't possibly feed the world or can't possibly, yield the same. Mm-hmm. What are we even talking about? I mean, how much food is actually being grown right now? I mean, if you look at global agriculture, we're not feeding the world right now. I mean, we could be, and then some, we could be feeding more than the current population. And the yields don't have to be as good. I mean, if you're bringing in inputs and you're again, a totally linear system that you have to pay for, it's worth having slightly lower yields, but with no inputs, you still do better on the bottom line. And certainly the system does better. So, I mean, yeah, I think it's really interesting to like actually listen to the arguments about why we have to continue doing it terribly. It breaks down pretty quick. It sounds absurd.
Yeah. I'm curious if you could touch on kind of something I had heard you speak about before was kind of like nutritional content, or like that is kind of being, as the land is being degenerated, so is the like nutritional content of our food. And maybe you can talk about that a little bit.
For sure. So the way plants get their food is, there's photosynthesis, and through that process they can, get carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. And beyond that, there are things that they can directly absorb from the soil, but for the most part, they're 100% reliant on the biology in the soil that takes inorganic minerals and makes them into little compounds like organic acids and hormones that the plant can take up and then use metabolically, put that into the system, and then that ends up in the food, right? So in a conventional system, when we are feeding plants, so the beauty of the industrial age of agriculture was we figured out what minerals are, and we figured out what vitamins are, and we figured out how to manufacture nitrogen because we needed to make bombs. And so the feeding of plants with inputs from off farm basically takes that interaction and makes it unnecessary. So 95% of terrestrial life on Earth lives in the soil. And the reason for it being there is to perpetuate life on Earth. And it is almost exclusively fed by plant carbon. So when the plants stop feeding those microorganisms, the ones that used to feed the plant start to die, and that creates a vacuum, and that vacuum is going to be filled by other organisms, and those tend to be generalists. Some of them are often pathogenic, and so you see these shifts in microbial populations in agricultural soils. They don't do the same job anymore, and the plant certainly isn't thinking, oh, I need to feed these guys because I'm getting my nitrogen all day, like in one massive dose. It's like, here's 10,000 hamburgers and you have to eat them all today. So we know now that about 40% of the nitrogen that gets applied in an agricultural setting can't be used by the plant and then is leached into the groundwater. Phosphorus is the same. There is a finite amount of phosphorus and we have pretty much almost mined it out. So those organisms that take free nitrogen, which is like more than 70% of our atmosphere, and fix it into the soil so that the plants can use it, that's free. And we're paying for it. We're going out of our way not to use that free source of food for our plants, and we're bringing it in. And the same thing we do with micronutrients now, because we think, oh, my plant is deficient in this or it's deficient in that. And the fact is, most agricultural soils in the world, in the farmed areas, have enough of those nutrients, even in tiny, tiny amounts, that if the right biology is there, it can be made available to the plant. And what's broken is that system. It's not that it's not there. It's not that it's irrevocably locked up. It just doesn't have the key. And the key is the life in the soil. And so feeding that back and bringing it back is just a function of stopping that process of massive disturbance over and over and over again and feeding them again. I mean, it's like really just turning on a light switch or opening the faucet or whatever. I mean, they really do want to come back. Life wants to happen. It just kind of does. So it's possible it can happen again.
So one thing, when I was listening to a lot of the, talks on regenerative farming and things, I was thinking it can get very technical. I listened to a lot of very technical talks. And a lot of our audience, I think right now in this conversation, they've probably already fallen in love with you and they want to buy whatever. So my question to kind of like slowly kind of work toward an ending is, how can consumers in the wine industry, and I think you might have kind of touched on this, so maybe, but how can consumers who are just going to a wine shop, who just enjoy wine for the connection, who love to like have a good time with wine, how can they support the regenerative farming movement and practices in general? Walking into a wine shop, or otherwise, what can they do?
Well, walking into a wine shop, I would go out of my way to ask pointed questions of the people who sell the wines and find out about, how close how close attention are they paying to the farming? How much do they care about that? And, I think a thing doesn't have to be labeled in a particular way. If somebody can defend the farming practices and actually talk about them fluently and say, yeah, I know that this is farmed this way. I think the main impact of a consumer right now, though, is really in a bigger picture role, because wine is still just this like tiny sliver. And there's going to be a pretty significant correction, I think, in wine where, we just acknowledge that as a justifiable land use, massive wine has no place on earth, okay? Like making gigantic factory wines is not a justifiable land use in drought limited, highly erodible soil systems where they're using the word sustainable should be an offense that can be treated very harshly. So using my strong words here.
I feel like you're not using your strong words here.
I'm like curating my son and editing myself as I go. It's really hard for me. But then as a person who eats.
What?
As a person who eats food, yeah, we really have to start insisting that we understand that the food system is broken and that our healthcare system, our national security, everything hangs in the balance because of this bloated, impossible, absurd food system that we've built. And wine is sort of irrelevant in that massive problem, but it's not really irrelevant because we have historically been leaders in the agricultural arena. We certainly have often been politicians, educators, etc. I mean, these are people with minds and they're curious and they have a role to play, but insist that this ridiculous abomination of a food system dies. And I don't care. I mean, I really don't care about the labeling and the premiums, because if we think about, like converting everyone to organic agriculture within the construct that we've created, where you have to be wealthy to be able to participate, we've already excluded the people who need the healthy food most. So it has to be for the people. This has to be the conventional way. And farmers need just to be supported. They don't need to be demonized. They don't need to be made an example of. They need to be supported through it. And so the insistence has to be at the level of kind of a political economy that sees that industry is not always having the people's interest at heart. And this sounds like communism or socialism, and I don't give a shit. But like we can insist, especially like the people who listen to you have all the power. Like everyone else is going to die. And you have all the power to insist on what you want your future to look like. And so stop participating in that system that wants you to be sick. Ugh. I mean, it's just impossible, but it's not, because like all the power is there. There's never been more opportunity. There's never been a bigger crack in the door. So just like slam your foot through it and make it happen.
Yeah, I love that. Britt, did you have any final questions, thoughts?
Well, I think that just for our viewers, one of your biggest powers is your dollar and where you spend it. And so being thoughtful about that is, because I'd thought about doing food justice a while ago. And like, I was talking to someone, I'm like, I really want to get into this. And they're like, how you can make the most change is where you decide to put your own money. And so thank you, Mimi, so much for kind of enlightening us as to how we can like make change. I mean, I want to make changes. I want to see changes for the future. I don't want that linear to flatten our like world basically till it dies, which is kind of like where we're headed. So yeah.
And can I say, I know we're talking about wine, we're talking about food, but I also feel like this, like crops and kind of doing justice to our earth has to do, I've been really obsessed with the fashion industry and how it's destroying the world. Mm-hmm. So I don't think it's limited. And I think you made this point, Mimi. It's not just one thing. But when you think about like, how can I buy wine better? How can I eat better? How can I support farmers better? It's like, how can I buy or not buy better clothing? And it's like, so, I mean, this is like a huge part. Talk about an ecosystem. Like this is one part of an ecosystem. Yeah, it's so true. It's like science, equity, sustainability, all of that is like all wrapped in this. So you can't make conscious decisions about what you're eating and drinking without also considering other ways you're making conscious decisions in your life. So that is where I will leave my
and drop that mic. Well, I mean, yes. Well, we're going to drop the mic with a little dance out that we're going to pair our wines with some songs that we've got lined up. So
yes.
Caitlin, you want to go first? Mimi go first? Me go first?
Okay, I'll go first since, I think it's like, I don't know, we'll just figure it out. So I paired my wine with a just like real chill, like kind of indie country. It's called Can't Do Much, which feels sad now. But I give it to you all on the day. I love you to the day. I love you to the day. I love you to the day.
It does feel a little sad after we talked about it.
It says, I'll love you till the day I die. And it's basically like,
so open the wine tonight. Don't wait. Don't sit on it.
Yeah, exactly. Don't wait.
Don't wait.
You know what? It's like love and death and farming and morbidity. We got it all. We got it all in this glass. So
and like can't do much, kind of like stop tilling that land, stop adding in the all those chemicals. Like, yeah, like let the land do what it's gonna do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, Mimi. So what song are you pairing with your wine?
So I am pairing with my wine. I just need a little more wine. Sniffle Parties, All the Snow Is Gone. And that's because spring is coming. And it also just makes me feel like shit doesn't have to matter so much.
This song's so good.
Also, I love a band named Sniffle Party. I mean,
right? It's got to be in the playlist now.
Oh yeah. Oh, we have a playlist. So if you ever look on our Spotify, we have a playlist of all songs that should go with your wines that you're drinking. So it will be on there.
In there already.
Check that out.
Sniffle Party is in the IPT Spotify playlist. So
sweet.
Well, I wasn't feeling that well, so I wasn't drinking today, but I still picked out a song because I felt like this song just would go with your wine. So cue it up, Lauren. You all know it. I always pick mainstream songs.
Hey, farmer, put away the DDT now. Give me spots on the apples, or leave me the birds and the bees. Please don't, it always seems to go that you don't know what you've got till it's gone. The cave paradise, put up a parking lot.
I also love Joni Mitchell. I'm a huge fan.
I love Joni Mitchell too, and I feel I dressed kind of 70s today in my women.
I love it.
Yeah, it's like give women equal say, equal pay every day for our last our thing closing out Women's History Month. And Joni Mitchell's just I just love her.
She's badass.
She is badass. Yeah, I dressed in a sweater that I have owned since I was probably 20 years old, and that was 13 years ago. So you're getting rid of that fast fashion in your life is what you're saying.
I love that sweater. And I want to say, if I say nothing else, I love what you said about the fashion thing, because I pledged to never buy a new item of clothing again, because there's enough clothes on earth that we could all just trade. So if you decide to abandon that sweater, just ship it to me on account of I like it a lot. It's got the patches.
Oh, there it is.
It just pick something of mine. I have lots of clothes that I would be happy to send your way for a nice brown sweater.
But it's got these reinforced elbow patches, so
Yes.
I feel like it's gonna last forever. And I do really think that the clothing industry is just like the devil incarnate. So that's my like.
I agree.
All you fashionistas out there, come out with your claws out. She's
Yeah.
ready to party. She's ready to party.
Don't add us right now. Like,
I got a lot more to say about that, but obviously not. This is maybe not the place exactly, but no, I think Mimi, we're so grateful for you being here, and also, I mean, you blew up our Instagram followers, so thanks for that.
Yay. That's ridiculous. That probably had nothing to do with me, but
it 100% had everything to do with you. We've been slowly climbing and counting our Instagram followers, and we're like so excited. Right before you announced it, we were like, oh my God, we just reached 700. And then you put it on your thing, and now we're like 760. It was like, okay, that took us 1 week to like.
yay, that's wonderful. Okay, good.
I know it's like so.
I love hanging out with you ladies. This was super fun.
This
Well,
was
I'm
really
like-
fun for us.
like this close to quitting all my jobs and moving to Hopewell Wine Farm. So
I tell you what, let's all quit our jobs and go mushroom hunting and solve mysteries all day long.
Oh my gosh. Like,
I
Best idea I've ever had. It
that is
is.
the best idea you've ever had.
you hunt for mushrooms. Do you go foraging?
I do. I love mushrooms. I love all the mushrooms. I love them all. The ones I can eat, the ones that I can think with, all of them.
I love those mushrooms too.
Mushrooms rule the world.
I was gonna say something in this episode because I was listening to some people talk about regenerative farming and like mushrooms and how nurturing they are to the soil. So I mean, it's related, but like, gosh, mushrooms is like that fungi world is just like.
It's where it all happens. It is truly the belt that's keeping us all together. So I'm all about, yep. We're going to start a regenerative mushroom business and we can
solve mysteries.
Things sort themselves out.
Yeah.
We all
We
haven't
don't need to wear clothes. We've already covered that. We can just say that's not necessary anymore. We can listen.
If y'all have cordyceps online, they are the weirdest, creepiest fungi thing. That's your little like homework for the week. Poor taste listeners, look up cordyceps, look up images. You're gonna die. It's the craziest thing in the world. You're gonna be like, did I just like die and go to Mars? Because this
So
world,
good for you.
yeah, but so fucking weird. So, well. Thank you so much for all.
Yeah, thank you so much for being on. We had such a great time. Yeah, if you guys want to, if you're not following Mimi, you should be following Mimi. That is her IG handle at Mimi Casteel. Buy her wines. Look for them. It honestly was hard for me to find it, and I am in a major metropolitan area, so I'm just gonna say that right now. But,
in San Diego, I found one. Her wines are Hopewell wines. 2 words. We didn't
2
really.
words, because there is a Hopewell that's 1 word that are not her wines.
Not the same.
Nope.
It's not the same.
Oh, it's like in the middle of like, I don't know, it's some weird like Ohio. I was like, why are these wines being grown in Ohio? But okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So here's a bottle of
sustainable. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, ladies.
So buy Hopewell, buy those other producers on that list we posted. We're gonna leave that up there. Support regenerative farming, support Mimi, and
don't support the fashion industry.
Yeah, boo on that. And forage for your mushrooms.
Yeah.
And as always,
stay thirsty.
Stay thirsty. Mimi, we love you. That was
Mimi. I actually want to be your best friend and start a mushroom hunting and wine solving.
I'm in. Consider it done. I'm so down. I'm really like I'm over.
So the funny thing was when I approached you the first time I met you, it was after you talked and I was like, you know what? I want to work harvest for you because I had just worked in Oregon at Fela, and I was like, oh man, I want to work for Mimi. Like, I was working at a restaurant at that point. So next week, Muscat.
Oh yeah, we didn't even talk about that.
Yeah. No, you guys, are we still, is this still happening?